Hello, everyone. This is Storm, Commissioner of the SADL, the Showdown Amateur Draft League, and welcome back to another video. This video in particular, we're going to be going over, as you can see, we have some spreadsheet on the left that has some rankings, and then on the right, we have our week one. It says week one rosters. These rosters are up to date because there were no changes, no team changes in week two. So these rosters, even though it does say week one, these rosters are the current up to date rosters. These are also the rosters that were made at the end of the free trade period that we had before the season officially started. So these rosters are also up to date, but they're also relevant to the list I have on the left. So basically, this is going to be a review of a preseason ranking I made for each team, or well, the entire league, as well as some draft grades I gave. And it's a great way to kind of introduce people following along to the league and to the teams. Basically, know which Pokemon each coach, sorry, has available, and basically just know what the league's about, and or I guess have more information on the league, should I say. Basically, that's what this is, and it's also for my coaches as well, so that they can see. I kind of just posted this in the server so they could see it. I didn't actually give an in-depth analysis as to why I handed out these rankings and grades and what exactly went into my mind, or my thought process when I was doing it. So this list is to help explain that. I did want to get this list. I actually recorded a version of this video uh, before the season started, and it did not have any audio in it. So I was not able to post it before the season started. I wanted it to be the very first video about the league, but I couldn't get that out, and I've been very busy since then with handling stuff with the league. Today, I'm actually recording this. Is actually our week two matches. Sorry, not season two. Our week two matches, and so I'm getting this out pretty late because by the time anybody can see this video, we've already have played 2 weeks worth of matches. But hopefully, uh, whatever I talk about in this video can help our coaches in any way, shape, or form, whether it be in future draft leagues or to make adjustments to their teams during the season. So, anyways, intro has been pretty long as it is. Let me get down into it. I'm going to be going in our draft order. The list on the right, the rosters, is actually in order of the draft. So we did a 15 round snake draft with a tier based draft, not a point based draft like a lot of other draft leagues are doing. We did tiers. So basically, it snaked around. So the first overall pick was Deoxys Speed, and then you come back around, and the 28th pick was King Gambit, and then 29th pick was Greninja. You get how it goes. So, anyways, um, my rankings were done based off of the roster, what they actually drafted, but it was also influenced by Terra Captain choices. So, what Pokemon you made a Terra Captain and what Terra types you chose. The draft grade is based off of just what you drafted. Nothing else plays into that. That's literally just based on what you drafted, when you picked them up, how much value you got, and maybe if I thought you reached too early on a pick. That's what determines that. So let's start with our very first team here, the House of Mouse. This is coached by Yi Haw Haw Yi. He's, as I said, just said, he had the first overall pick. And you see over here on the left, I ranked him number 11 and I gave him a B grade. And the big reason for this was mainly because of the Deoxys Speed pick. Deoxys Speed is a very versatile Pokemon. It can do a lot of different things, can set hazards, can be offensive because of how fast it is. It can run like uh, very little speed, and it can run like non-speed boosting natures like adamant or modest, and then be able to invest a lot into its offensive stats. Its attack and its special attack and do a bunch of damage. So it's a very versatile Pokemon. It's a Pokemon I thought would go early. I didn't expect it one overall. I feel like there are better Pokemon you could have drafted number one overall from our first tier, which had a decent number of Pokemon. You'll see them more as we go down the list. Um, Outside of that, really and truthfully, I don't absolutely hate his draft. He has a lot of really good priority. Also picked up some other good speed here with Greninja, and we see the Noivern down here. Very fast team, which is always nice. One of the concerning parts I did not like about his draft, or I say concerning, but just something. This Golert pick right here, not a huge fan of it. Um, I don't have the actual draft sheet listed, but Cerulege was the last pick in our draft. So I think the reason why he picked this Golurk was because he wanted a fighting immunity or another fighting resistance. He already has a Chandelure up here. He goes with the Golurk. He could have easily have gotten a Cerulege, and obviously that would mean two Ghost Fire types. But I don't think that's big of a problem if you're trying to have options because Cerulege and Chandelure are two very different Pokemon, even though they share the same type. So I really, if he wanted a Ghost type, especially a physical attacking Ghost type, there was another one available and a better one at that with Cerulege. So that's kind of I guess like a negative for me in his draft. Also, another big negative, as you could probably tell, his only form of Hazard Clear is Cryogonal. And that basically means that in matchups, if you say just every week you need to bring Hazard Clear, you have to bring Cryogonal every single matchup. Or you don't bring Hazard Clear and your opponent gets to set up hazards against you. I think that's a very big negative as well going for his team. With that being said, I didn't absolutely hate his team. Like I said, I gave it 11th rank overall. That's because he has some pretty good Terra captains. I think the Terra Noivern is huge, very big. The Terra Normal Boom Burst goes crazy. Probably going to win him several matchups. And Bastiodon is a great Terra captain as well. Terra Fighting, Terra Fairy, I both love those as Terra types for it as well. Getting Stab on the body press, and Fairy to give it great defensive utility. Overall, pretty good. Sudowoodo, I don't hate either. I personally feel like maybe Pikachu would have been a better Terra Captain, but overall, good Terra Captain choices, and not really a bad grade in my opinion. Because, like I said, there's just a few things that really I personally wouldn't have made, and that's kind of a big influence with what the way I graded was essentially. Is it something I would do? Right? Is it something I would draft? Is it something I would choose? And to be honest, the deciding factor between a lot of these rankings really came down to like one Terra captain choice or one Terra type that I really didn't like. So overall, not terrible. Moving on to our second one, and here we have the Baltimore Bullet Punches. Of course, if you've been following my channel, coached by yours truly. And I gave myself a pretty favorable ranking. And like I said, the reason why is because of the subjectivity of the fact that I was pleased overall with my draft. So it's hard for me to have negative aspects on my draft because I drafted these things and I think I did a good job. Obviously, I didn't give myself the number one overall pick, and I gave myself an A minus, and I'll talk about that when I break down my own draft. I think I got Dragapult second overall. Dragapult might be one of the best Pokemon in draft, if not the best Pokemon in draft. So getting it second overall, that's very very good. I also got Iron Treads, another Pokemon I really wanted. Filled out my team pretty good. I got a pretty good Terra Captain here with Revavroom. Um, and even came back in my wild card and got Weavile, which I thought was really cool as well. I think maybe the biggest problem I have with my draft, I think my Terra Captains are pretty good as well. I obviously I I made them my Terra Captains. I think the biggest issue with my draft overall was I was very limited on setup sweepers, and I had to basically both my wild cards had to be didn't have to be, but I made them setup sweepers because of that. My hazard clear is not bad by any means, but I am very reliant on lower tier Pokemon for my hazard clear, with Toadschool and Girder being my two forms of hazard clear outside of Mousehold and Iron Treads. So not bad overall. I think some of the more questionable picks I have, I was sniped a lot in this draft, so it forced me to have to think outside of the box and draft away from my plan. And so because of that, I drafted like Girafarig, which draft or not Girafarig, which I don't love. I have some plans for it, but it kind of is a pick that I don't say forced into, but I kind of made because I wasn't sure where to go next. Similar thing with this Toadschool because I had Toadscruel sniped from me, so I could not get Toadscruel, so I had to go for Toadschool because I still had big plans for Toadscruel. So, anyways, overall, pretty solid. I'm not disappointed with my roster, not disappointed with my draft. Would have made some changes maybe in hindsight, but we'll see how this season works out for me. So, moving on. So, our third member in draft order, third team in draft order was the Diamond Defenders, coached by Vanny. And as you can see, they wind up being my second to last ranked, and I gave them a C minus draft grade. And the biggest reason for this was they have zero hazard clear. This team has no hazard clear. That's never a good sign. Having one hazard remover, at the very least, you could say I can bring hazard removal and afford my team that option. No hazard removal does not give you that option at all. So this basically puts you in a situation where basically your opponent can stack however many hazards they want against you, and there's nothing you can do about it. He doesn't have a grounded poison type either, so toxic spikes do well into his team. Sticky webs do very well into his team. Spikes also do pretty well into his team. He doesn't have very many levitators. I think the only Pokemon he has that is not grounded is Galarian Articuno, and it also means that if your opponent brings rocks, you're forced to run boots on Galarian Articuno or take the stealth rock damage. So very limiting in terms of team building. I think it's by far the biggest negative to this team. Because outside of that, I don't hate his team at all. He gets pretty good. Darkrai third, maybe a bit of a reach. Third overall picking the Darkrai, but it's still a very good Pokemon. I don't hate him for it by any means. Has some great Pokemon like Archulodon, Deoxys Defense. Sinnoh is a very sleeper Pokemon here. Gets a great Terra Captain with Galarian Articuno and Rhyperior. Two of those very good. Not a huge fan of his wild cards. Blaziken's not bad. That's not a bad choice at all. Gardevoir, not great for a wild card. It's a tier 4 in our draft, so we could have got something a little bit better. Terra Captain choices, like I said, I like the Rhyperior and the Articuno Galarian Articuno, sorry. I don't like the normal Terra type. I don't know what that's for. He could have a plan for it. Maybe it's ghost immunity. Not the biggest fan of it. Luxray, I see the possibilities with the Luxray Terra type, so I don't hate it. Um, so not a terrible draft, but not having hazard removal and not having grounded poison type, it really just makes your team that much worse because it makes it that easy. It makes your team building so restrictive, and it makes it much easier to build into your team. So, pretty big negatives. Big reason why I gave him such a low ranking and a low grade. Uh, Moving on to our fourth in draft order, we have the Chicago Toros, coached by Tanner, and as you can see right here, kind of middle of the road in both the ranking and grade. Gave him a B. Big reason for that, similar to excuse me, I lost my train of thought. Similar to the House of Mouse, one form of hazard removal down here with the Bramble Gas, and I feel like having to use a wild card and having to use a wild card to get hazard removal, and then choosing Bramble Gas, which is not a terrible Pokemon by any means, but having to reach down that far to get the Bramble Gas and use your wild card on it, not very good for drafting. I think overall that's probably the biggest negative going into his draft. Because outside of that, his draft isn't terrible. I don't hate it by any means. I think getting the Volcarona with one of your wild cards is very big. Volcarona went very long without being drafted. I think he got some good solid overall picks. Gets Grimstar. That's a great Pokemon to have in draft. Um, Goes with the Sneasler fourth overall. That's not a bad pick by any means, but I feel like there were better Pokemon on the board, so that definitely has a negative impact on his draft grade. Some pretty hard hitters though. Dragonite, Landorus, gets a very good Infernape pick here as well. Solid support. Bisharp is a great Terra captain. So not a bad draft by him, really and truthfully. Just really don't like this Bramblegas pick and the fact that it limits you heavily because it's your only form of hazard clear and you used a wild card pick on it. Moving to his Terra captains, the Bisharp and Arboliva, two great Terra captain choices. Making the Bramblegas a Terra captain, I'm not too sure about it. I'm not a huge fan of the normal type as well for the Terra type, but not an awful draft. Like I said, very middle of the road for me. Gave him the ninth rank, gave him a B grade, not bad at all. Fifth in draft order, we have the New York Munchlax. Very, very, very good draft, in my opinion. One of the highest ranked drafts, as you can see, gave it a good A grade, gave it a second overall. I don't mind the Chin Pao this early. I feel like there were some better Pokemon you could have drafted, but I do like the Chin Pao. I don't hate it by any means. Um, get some other decent, really very good Pokemon. Quaquaval, Latias, Glamora. These are all really good Pokemon. And probably my favorite part about this draft, arguably three of the best Terra Captains, really and truthfully. There's only a handful of Pokemon I would say are better than these three for Terra Captain choices. And he gets all three of them, including sniping me twice with the Jolteon and the Frostmoth. I wanted both of these Pokemon, and he sniped me with them. So unfortunate on my behalf. Also, great wild card picks here. Love the Tingaloo, love the Galarian Zapdos as your wild card picks. Do not hate this draft at all. Um, Pretty good on hazard removal as well. Both Glamora and Quaquaval, very good hazard forms of hazard removal that are versatile as well, and you can bring in a lot of different matches. So you're not limiting yourself at all with those. Also, some pretty good late round picks here, like the Appleton and the Hisuian Sliggoo as well for non Terra Captain choices. Definitely like it a lot. And of course, we see he uses the Terra Captains. Probably my biggest issue, if I had to pick up any with the Terra Captain choices, I would have loved this Jolteon to be Terra Fairy instead of Terra Grass. But outside of that, not bad at all. So moving on to sixth here in our draft order, we have the Washington Wishmakers. And as you can see, number one in my ranking, a an A on their draft grade. I absolutely love this draft. Huge steal with the Iron Valiant, sixth overall. That's massive. Iron Valiant, one of the best Pokemon for draft, and he gets it. Follows it up with Raging Bolt and Golden Go as Raging Bolt, Golden Go, and Rillaboom. Three very good picks. Good priority users. Golden Go very versatile, very defensive. Also with the Swampert. Will say this team was pretty slow, but he outside of the Iron Valiant, but he does patch it up later, getting a great. This was a snipe as well. A great wild card pick. Snipes me with the Cinderace pick. Also gets Keldeo, which is another nice addition. Has sticky webs on his team. That's also very important. Um, Will say his hazard removal is a little limited. He kind of has to rely heavily on the Cinderace. Oops, has to rely heavily on the Cinderace, but he has Espeon, so he's able to deny hazards and matchups where he needs to. So overall, I'm not even mad about his hazard situation. Quillfish Hisui is also another really good pick, as well as Cleaver, so he has great hazard setters, and he has the ability to deny hazard removal with Golden Go. This is a very well structured draft. I absolutely love it. This is a big reason why I put him up that high. Good Terra Captain choices here as well. Love the Espeon for the Terra Captain choice. Love Driftwood for the Terra Captain choice. I do feel like the Cacturn is a little questionable, but I know he did say after draft that he was not expecting three Terra Captains. He thought he was only allowed to have two, so he just kind of slotted in that Cacturn right there because he just didn't have another Pokemon that he felt comfortable making a Terra Captain choice on. So we'll see how that works out for him. Moving on to our seventh in draft order, the Safari Rhyhorns. This is coached, sorry, by the way, by Bernie. And I don't know if mentioned the Washington Wishmakers are coached by Jake, making sure I mention all of my coaches' names. Safari Rhyhorns, coached by Bernie. Great draft. As you can see, I put him over here at the fifth rank, give him an A minus draft grade. And I love this draft as well. It's another draft that I'm like, yeah, this is one of the best ones for sure. Great Tusk, great pick over here, getting him seventh overall. I think that's a great steal. Some good Pokemon. These are some Pokemon I had on my radar. I necessarily wasn't sniped, but these are Pokemon I had kind of on my big board, I guess you could say. Slowking Galar, Ogerpon, Wellspring, two very good Pokemon. I also like the Volcanion pick right here as well. Mamoswine's a bit of a steal as well. It's a great Pokemon. And he comes back two great wild card picks here. Azelf making it all the way through and becoming a wild card is huge, as well as Enamorus and Carnot. That gives you a lot of value with them, especially because you're able to get what you want early and come back and still get very good Pokemon. So by far, really, really good overall. I guess maybe one of the only issue I may have with this draft, and a reason why I kind of put it so low, you're over relying on Great Tusk for your hazard removal. There's no other form of hazard removal on this team. So you do have to rely on that Great Tusk. Not that Great Tusk is a bad Pokemon by any means, but you do have to rely on it in order to remove hazards in matchups where you need it. So that can be a bit of an issue. But I don't think it's too concerning of an issue to drop him too hard. Like I said, I give him the A minus there. Um, I think outside of that, he drafted well, has pretty good speed on his team. Uh, Pretty good Terra Captain choices as well. Makes a Talonflame a Terra Captain. I think that's not bad at all. It helps with Talonflame's defensive potential. Electros, also great Terra Captain choice with the Electros, but also great Terra types. Like the Steel, I like the Poison. Using taking advantage of Electros's natural bulk as well as its levitate ability. And then Zangoose, this is also another really good one. I like the normal and fighting Terra type choices. Big damage from the Terra normal. Sorry about that. From the Terra normal quick attack, and also getting stab on like close combat. That's huge. Very good draft. Very good Terra Captain choices. Moving on, Anchorage Beartix. This is eighth in our draft order. And as you can see, they're a little lower on the list right here. And this is largely due, I know I don't have the draft tiers listed next to each Pokemon, but I will say they did reach on a lot of their draft picks. And that's maybe the biggest issue I have. I think that, by the way, they're coached by St. Wumples. Um, I do think that they have an idea, a strategy that they have created, and that's a big reason why they went with these choices. So they're confident in it. So I can't really uh, take off anything for that. I do think though that a lot of these picks may have been reaches. These Pokemon would have been later, and you could have drafted other things. Overall, though, they still come out of it with a really good draft. I'm not too mad about that. Urshifu Rapid Strike. This was a tier two. They took it with their first pick, so they did drop a tier to draft this. They also dropped a tier to draft Petront and Ogerpon Hearthflame. Or well, no, they didn't draft. I'm sorry, they didn't drop a tier to draft Ogerpon Hearthflame, but they did drop a tier to draft Petront. Diancie, I know that they also dropped a tier to draft. Um, just trying to look at the rest of the team, and I want to say they dropped another tier somewhere as well to pick up something. Maybe I'm wrong. Actually, I think they dropped the tier to draft Beartic because these are these three are all tier sixes, so they did drop as well to draft the Beartic. With that being said, though, I do like that they came around with their wild cards and got both Iron Boulder and Iron Bundle. Two great Pokemon. Iron Bundle, amazing speed tier, a lot of potential. Iron Boulder as well, also super fast and a lot of potential as well. So pretty good draft, really and truthfully. Like I said, the reaching I think is a negative thing because probably some of these picks could have been better Pokemon. With that being said, there is the confidence there. So I did have to bump it up a little bit. I don't think it is one of the worst drafts, even with all of the reaching that was happening. He still gets everything that he needs, really and truthfully. Decent hazard clear. He is a little over reliant over here with the fortress for hazard removal. I think it is his only form, so he does have to rely heavily on the fortress. Probably that's another negative in his drafting as well. His team is also a bit slow outside of these two, right? Ogrepon Hearthflame has decent speed, Sandy Shocks as well, but everything else on this team is sub 100 outside of having to use Iron Boulder and Iron Bundle. Not that that's a bad thing, but I do think when you're trying to use a core of these earlier round Pokemon that you value, obviously having drafted them very early, some of them dropping down a tier to draft, uh, and you're forced to run Pokemon that maybe you didn't have a strategy for faster. I feel like that can be a negative aspect to your team. Overall, though, pretty solid. Good Terra Captain choices as well. Diancie here, I love these Terra types as well. The Greedent has some pretty solid Terra types as well. The Seviper is probably the only one I question. I feel like this should have 100% been Beartic. Beartic is a great uh, really and truly a great Terra Captain choice. You can run like Terra Electric and give yourself Bolt Beam coverage. And you can always try to find a way to fit in either a snow or a rain user on your team to make good use of it. So probably the biggest, probably another negative really going into his team. Um, as far as like his ranking goes, this obviously is not a like I said, this is not a drafting decision. This was post draft. Um, so really and truthfully, it's not horrible. Definitely. I mean, I think the ranking and the grade reflects that. I don't think it's bad, but I think it could have been better. And I feel like the reaching could have been avoided. Obviously, if you want this Pokemon, you want this Pokemon, and I can't blame or dock points for having a strategy in your head. But I do feel like if that strategy does come in the way of overall quality of your team, I feel as if it can be a negative thing. So we'll see how this team plays out. I'm very interested. I definitely have my eye on this team with a very unique sort of draft that it had. One of the only, I think, the only other person who dropped a tier when drafting, I think, was the Dewey Duwats. I'm pretty sure. So very interesting. Moving on. This is ninth in our draft order. The King City Kingdras, coached by Warmaster. Um, this team sort of falls into, as you can see where I ranked it here with the 12th overall. 12th overall in my ranking with a B minus draft grade falls into this ploy of just not having great hazard removal. That's a very common thing you'll see with some of the teams I ranked lower is limiting yourself in hazard removal because it makes your opponent that much easier. Makes it that much easier for your opponent to plan into your team and restricts you that much when you are planning because you basically, if your opponent has a lot of hazards or hazards that do well into your team, like sticky webs, stealth, rocks, spikes, etc., your opponent can say, I can bring them, and if my opponent wants to remove them, they have to bring this Pokemon, and they have to run this move on this Pokemon as well. So it restricts you that much. So only for hazard removal being Chichino, definitely a bit of a negative in my opinion. Also, another thing, this team is pretty slow. All of the fastest Pokemon, really and truly, are these two right here: Dugtrio Alola and Raichu Alola. Zorkus, Hisuian Zoroark is also has decent speed. Also, Chinchino Kilowattrel. Actually, never mind. I take back what I said. This team does have decent speed. Um, Kind of wasn't paying attention to some of these mid round picks. I forgot how fast Chinchito and Kilowattrel were. So actually, overall, decent speed. I do feel like, though, with that being said, his first couple of picks are very limited in speed. Clefable and Overquill, for example, are very slow, or not very slow, but fairly slow. Drachi and Manaphy are both base 100, but also don't have ways to boost their speed. Gouging Fire base is sub base 100. I think it's 91 base speed. Does have a way to boost its speed, but being so slow off the rip is not a good thing. Um, so I feel like having so much of your core and your higher tier picks being so limited in speed is not a good thing because that does mean you have to bring lower tier Pokemon to have that speed. And I think maybe even in his draft, when during draft, that was something that may have been in his mind was, hey, I need to draft speed down the line because my initial Pokemon are fairly slow. Now, that's a bad thing because you need to get the value out of your lower tiers. Hey, if your team's slow, if your team needs hazard removal, if your team needs hazard setters, if your team needs certain immunities or certain roles, any kind of role that's needed, get the value out of your lower tiers. That's very important. And so does a good job of doing that. But I do think sort of limits himself by having so many very good Pokemon and higher tier choices being a little slower. One hazard remover, like I said before. I do like the Skarmory here as a wild card pick. I think that's actually really big for him. Uh, One of the reasons why I ranked him so low in the power rankings, though, is mainly uh, due to Terra Captain choices. Kilowattrel, that's a very good Terra Captain. Having both Flygon and Chinchino and not making them Terra Captains, I feel as if is sort of limiting on your team. Chinchino has a lot of potential as a Terra Captain, hits very hard, Flygon as well can make you great use of its bulk and its ability with Levitate to become a good Terra Captain. I actually don't hate this Crocolore Terra Captain. I feel like if you draft the Crocolore, being able to make it a Terra type, or being able to terrestrialize it, should I say, is a benefit for you. Sandaconda, not really bad either. But like I said, I definitely think Flygon or Chinchino would have been better to fill out this role. Uh, so overall, not one of the better, in my opinion, not one of the better drafts. Can be a bit limiting, like I said, because of how slow a lot of the earlier draft choices are. Having to rely on lower tier Pokemon to be the bulk of your speed is usually not a great strategy. But we'll see how it works out. Obviously, as we all say, this is just my opinion. And a lot of this, like I said, this is only week 2, so I have seen how some of these teams have played out, but there's still a lot left in the season. We have a 10-week season. So there's still a lot more games to be played, and obviously a lot more strategy and a lot more, uh, just a lot more play. There's a lot left to the season to see. So moving on with the Turin Trevenants. This is one of our commissioners here. Uh, 10th in the draft order, one of our co-commissioners. It's Titan HD. He's the coach of the Turin Trevenants. And not really a bad draft, middle of the road, as you can see right here. Eighth ranked, B plus draft grade. And I can't be mad at this draft. I feel like it just kind of does everything it needs to do. Has pretty good speed. Roaring Moon, Zamazenta, two very fast Pokemon. Also with the Hawlucha, Gengar, come down here. Cyclozar is also very fast. So good speed. Um, Decent with the hazard removal as well. Toadstool, Cyclozar, Komala. That's all very good forms of hazard removal. And not really much. I think getting the Iron Hands here with a wild card is big. That's a very big pick for sure. Sylveon as well. That's a great Terra Captain choice. Avalokasui, I actually forgot Avalokasui is also a form of hazard removal with Rapid Spin. I will say having to rely so heavily on Rapid Spinners can be a negative because Rapid Spin can be blocked by Ghost types. So I feel like doing that can limit you a little bit, not having like a Defogger or even grabbing something with like Tidy Up or a potential court change as well. Very limiting with the Rapid Spinner. Because it makes you have to plan. Your opponent has a ghost type; they have to plan. Uh, they can plan against it easily with their ghost types. Biggest negative, I think, though, when it came to the ranking aspect, giving this team an eighth rank, was mainly because of the Terra Captain choices. Sylveon is very good. Trevenant is not terrible. I don't understand the normal type. This may just be another trying to get a ghost immunity. And then Toadstool, in my opinion, is not great as a Terra Captain. I feel like not Zoroark, Hisui, Hisui and Avalug, and potentially even the Kamala could have been better choices here for a Terra Captain than the Toadstool. I feel like Terra Toadstool is just a little bit low value, although it could work out. We'll have to see. Like I said, the season will advance, and there's always something I can account for from an outsider or an objective point of view. Just looking, or should I say, subjective point of view, looking at it from the outside is I don't know what the strategies for these coaches are. These coaches could have ideas for these teams. I know when you look at my team, you may say, oh, I don't like this and this. I had ideas when I drafted those Pokemon. And that can be very true for my coaches. So you can't ever discount the ingenuity of somebody piloting a team. You never know what it's going to be. You never know what they have planned for it. And they could have some very good ideas. So, Minnesota Glow Kings. These are coached by Board Addict. And middle of the road once again. Seventh rank, B plus. I like the Chiyu here. By this point, a lot of the really high tier Pokemon from our tier 1 had been drafted. So I feel as if this is the perfect place to get a Chiyu. Great pick with the Tornadus Therian and the Gliscor. I think very good high value here. He sniped me with the scissor. Unfortunately, your Baltimore Bullet Punches do not have a bullet punch user. That being said, I definitely think this great mid tier from him, right? I think this little selection right here of about four Pokemon is not is very good. I like the Hatterene, getting hazards off the field, or stopping your opponent from getting up hazards is always a great thing to have. Reggie Drago, Iron Thorns, great Terra Captains. Serena, great value Pokemon as well. I will say his later tiers I'm not the biggest fan of. Mainly the Rotom and using your wild cards to get Monkey Dory and Alola Mola. I feel as if those just aren't great picks for a wild card. I will say he does get a bit of a steal here though because Quagsire was not listed on the draft document, meaning by default it was a tier 7 and it was not it was not supposed to be a tier 7. Quagsire really and truthfully is like a tier 4 or a tier 5. He does get it with a tier 7 because I left it off the draft document. So good eyes by him to capitalize on my mistake. So that's actually a huge amount of value getting Quagsire with a tier 7 pick. But outside of that, like I said, his last few rounds I'm not the biggest fan of, and that's probably the biggest reason why I docked him a few points. It's overall not a bad thing because his team is still good outside of that. Um, like I said, I think he had a very good early draft. I don't hate it. I think he is a little limited on his hazard removal. Has to rely on Scissor for defog basically, but he does have the Hatterene to supplement that. Or actually, he has Serena and Rapid Spin as well. Sorry, I forgot about that. So hazard removal isn't a big problem for him. But like I said, I think his later round picks could have been a little bit better. Um, Terra Captain choices, great Terra Captain choices. Don't really have anything to disagree with any of these. I think would have liked to have maybe seen a Terra Fairy on the Reggie Drago, but outside of that, not bad, not bad at all. Next, we have the Wiltshire War Turtles, coached by Phil. This was, I believe, 12th overall in our draft order. Yes. Um, and once again, a great draft. One of my favorite drafts. Fourth overall, A- grade. This draft is loaded with some very hard hitters. Uh, Great wild card pick here with the Ursaluna Blood Moon. I think that's phenomenal. Palafin early was one of the better Pokemon left on the board at the time, so I think it's a good pick for him. Gets the Meowscarada, gets Kyurem, Thunderous Therian. Hitmonlee's a great Terra Captain. So really good pick, really good picks. I mean, honestly, also Lycanrod Dust, that's another good wild card pick. So I don't hate his draft by any means. I mean, it's phenomenal. I think maybe the biggest negative I could give it is a little limited with defensive Pokemon. Not to say there aren't any. Obviously, Kyurem can be very defensive, Slowking and Weezing, but with so much offense very early, and then even going with more offense later, you really start to run out of ways you can deal with certain offensive threats. So I feel like it's kind of an arms race type deal where you're offensive and you put a lot of pressure on your opponent, but the moment your opponent can take advantage of it and get set up or position themselves correctly, it's going to be a big problem. With that being said, it's not a bad draft because you have the offensive pressure. You do have some defensive Pokemon to lean back on. I think Doug Trio is a great tier 7 pick as well. So overall, I mean, definitely not bad. I mean, I gave it the A- grade for a reason. I think it's a very good draft. I think it's good choices here. So Terra Captains as well. Hitmonlee, Duraludon, Doug Trio. Those are all great Terra Captain choices. Don't despise the Terra types you chose for any of them either. I mean, here you have the Doug Trio. You have Ice, so that way you can get some ground ice coverage, and then you also have the Terra Dark for boosted sucker punches. So very very good draft. Moving on, we have the Dewey Duats. This is another co-commissioner of ours, coached by Fiery Vortex. And really good draft. I will say right off the bat, my biggest issue with this draft is that it is pretty slow. A pretty slow draft, mainly because your fastest Pokemon is Latios, and you don't really have much else that matches it in speed besides the Alolan Ninetales. Uh, I will say it is supplemented heavily by the Galvantula, getting sticky webs up is obviously great, and it also with the Alola Ninetales you do have screens, so you're not relying. You're giving Pokemon the opportunity to set up their speed. Also, having the Tyranitar and the Excadrill combo here for Sand, of course, lets your Excadrill be fast. So there are great ways to supplement the speed, but initial speed being so slow is definitely um, not a positive thing by any means. But it's not a bad draft. I mean, yeah, hazard removal is pretty solid with the Corviknight. Um, that's kind of all you're relying on though with your hazard removals. That can be a negative aspect. Oh, sorry, rapid spin on Excadrill as well. So not very limited in that aspect as well. I do like this drop right here. Samurott Hisui was a tier 2. Having the second to last pick in the first round limits your options with tier 1s. So he drops, gets the Samurott Hisui, and then is able to come back and get a huge wild card pick with Excalibur. So getting a very big tier 1 with a wild card and being able to pair it up with a little Ninetales is great drafting. His draft is also extremely versatile. I was kind of alluding to this earlier with having a sticky webs user, having screens, having sand. He even has the potential for sun down here. So it's a very versatile draft, and it brings a lot for his opponent to deal with. He even has psychic terrain. So overall, I mean, it's a very versatile draft. Like I said, biggest problem is initial speed, being very slow right out the gate, not having to rely on either setting up weather or using setup moves to get your speed puts you in those positions sometimes that's not very good because you have to play around it and you also have to see if your opponent isn't ready for it. Like, if your opponent says, well, there's a good chance he could bring sand, then I can bring a weather to counter it. Whereas opposed to having that immediate speed is just like, well, this Pokemon's out and it's fast. There's no extra steps to it. It's just naturally fast. Um, that's probably the biggest negative for this team and the reason why I did drop it just out of that kind of that top 5 where you see I have all my A grades and A minus grades. Um, Terra Captain choices, love the Colossal Terra Captain choice. Um, the Indeedee female, not bad either. I would have liked to have seen one of these Terra types be fighting, and the Executor Terra types as well, not bad by any means. I think he was a bit limited. He has a lot of early power, early draft power. His lower tiers are not great. Um, he does have some value there, so I think he's a little limited on his Terra Captain choices. Moving forward, this is the last team uh, in our draft order, Cerulean Guardians, coached by Bean. And unfortunately, as you can see, this team was very low in my rankings, as well as my draft grades. And the main reason for that is this team is kind of all over the place. I didn't like a lot of his mid round picks. As you can see, he has all 3 Kanto starters, and he has, I believe, um, 3 evolutions. And really and truthfully, a lot of these picks uh, just aren't really there. I think the way he was positioned in the draft, basically, he would be the end of a tier, and then he would be the beginning of the next tier. So some of these picks, like for example the Blastoise pick, this was the very first tier 5 chosen, and not that Blastoise is a bad tier 5, but I think there were better tier 5s he could have picked as well. Also, Glaceon was the first tier 6. Once again, there were better tier 6 that could have been chosen. Mischievous was the first tier 7. There were better tier 7s that could have been chosen. I feel like that was not a very good drafting strategy, right? I don't think he got a lot of value out of his picks. Having the first pick from every tier that we drafted from, some of these mid round picks just weren't great. That being said, I like the Garchomp Walking Wake, and I love both of his wild card picks. The Iron Moth, the Cerulege, I think these are great uh, for a wild card pick. Also gets Mew. Mew's a very good Pokemon to draft, very versatile. One of the bigger negatives as well, though, is Regieleki. Uh, you have to think there were two people who basically dropped out of tier 1s. So there was actually a decent amount of tier 1 Pokemon left. Urshifu Single Strike, Excalibur, and I believe Iron Bundle were left over. in tier one. So he could have easily drafted those. He went with Regieleki. This was kind of the consensus worst tier one Pokemon because it cannot terrestrialize in this format, or our draft league, should I say? So picking it, I think, is a negative. Some pretty good earlier round picks. Vaporeon, I also think, is very good as well for a mid round pick. And I really think this draft starts to fall off right around here because I don't love these picks. They're not bad, but I don't love them. They're not great. They're not. There's not a lot of synergy. I know he tries that. I think he wants to have some sun synergy here with the Venusaur and the Charizard, but you don't have a natural sun setter. And Sun is very good for his team too, by the way. The Walking Wake, being able to capitalize on Sun, Iron Moth, even though it's not a photosynthesis Pokemon, is able to use the Sun to boost his fire moves. Same thing with Ceruledge, but he doesn't have a natural Sun setter. He has to manually set Sun through Sunday Day, so that's also very limiting for his team. Uh, but like I said, it's the worst for a reason. Uh, it's not awful, right? There could be more. There could be worse drafts, should I say? Terra Captain choices. The Charizard, I love these Terra. I love the Terra Captain choices here for Charizard and Blastoise. I think this Glaceon, I would have loved to have seen it been a Flareon. I think Flareon being able to use like Terra Normal Facade, Terra Normal Quick Attack, or even like Terra Fighting or Terra Grass, Terra Water. I think I would have liked that better as a Terra Captain choice than the Glaceon. But there we have it. That pretty much wraps up all of my draft ranking, my draft grades. Um, Try to get through this as fast as possible because like I said I already made this video. It just did not have any audio. But that wraps that up. Will probably have this put out on Sunday, the same day I record it. Um, and that's just it's just a great way to, I guess, kind of introduce you to the teams, introduce you to the league if you're not already a part of the league and you're watching the video. So I'll wrap it up here, and I will see y'all later. I'll be having I do play my match later today. I haven't played it as of recording, so I'll have that match recorded and up, and then I'll have my week two watch through as well. Probably towards either the beginning or middle of the week coming up. So I will see y'all later.